Welcome to Ginny's, where East meets West, and a slice of Eastern philosophy becomes a part of Western thinking. I'm your host, Ginny Gong. For years, the Asian American Center at UCLA has been recognized as the leading provider of data and information on the Asian Pacific American community for researchers and students. Now, the East Coast is well on its way with its own counterpart, while serving as a clearinghouse for census information. My first guest has been selected to head this East Coast effort as the director of the Asia Pacific American Census Information Center and director of the Asian American Studies program at the University of Maryland at College Park. Prior to coming to Maryland, he was the first director of the Center for the Study of Culture, Race, and Ethnicity at Ithaca College. He has authored many books and conducted extensive research in the social demography of racial groups in the United States. Join me in welcoming the director of the Asian American Studies program at College Park, Larry Shinagawa. Welcome, Larry.
Hi, Ginny.
How fortunate for University of Maryland College Park to have someone of your caliber heading their Asian American Studies program.
Not at all. I really feel much more fortunate that I'm here and being in a place that's wonderful, exciting, and engaging all the time.
Well, we look forward to great things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have traveled extensively with your family growing up. In fact, you refer to yourself as a military brat.
Right.
How has that experience contributed to your choice of careers or what you are doing?
I've got to say that it made a big difference in my life. I'm the son of a Nisei, a second-generation Japanese American. And not only was he a Nisei, but he was a soldier. And when he went over to Japan, he also married my mother, who was a war bride who came over to the United States. I also have a sister who is biracial, and she was born 10 years younger than myself. And as a result, what has happened is that I've had an experience being in a family that was both in the military, but also one that was very multiracial and multicultural. And living through all that experience, I gotta say, I learned a lot from being in that kind of environment.
But you've been in this profession for, about 30 years, and you have ventured into an arena that very few Asian Americans would, even think about venturing into. Discussions of race, discussions of ethnicity. What inspired that?
There were many things. You have to say that part of your life is your biography, right? And what you've experienced. And as I was growing up in the military, at times I've had the most wonderful experiences in places like Okinawa. And in other times I had some very horrendous experiences of anti-Asian feelings, such as in Pennsylvania when I was growing up during the height of the Vietnam War. When you make these contrasts of looking at the various times of your life, you have to say to yourself, race does make a difference.
It's not true when people say they don't see race.
No, not at all. At least my generation, it was certainly true that we were quite cognizant of it. And certainly my sister and I, we both went through the American experience in different ways. As I mentioned, she was biracial. I was
And let me just ask you, biracial, what races is she?
She is both Caucasian and white.
Okay.
Caucasian, white, and Asian.
Okay. And so you could see this from different perspectives.
That's correct, right.
Now, you were a professor at Sonoma College, is that correct? Where you talked about an experience that you had with a student who passed away, and that really hit a chord with you. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. After I graduated from Berkeley, I started teaching at Sonoma State University, and early on in my career, I became a chair of that program. And eventually what happened was that I was chair of all of the ethnic studies programs. And it was de facto given to me as a responsibility. And that was even before my tenure, of all things. And when that time happened, I remember a young man. He was a Chinese American, actually a Taiwanese American. His name was Quan Chung Kao. And he was a microbiology student who studied very, very hard, very quiet, very studious in my class, never said anything, graduated, got a B. Well, what ended up happening is that he went on to get his graduate degree in Michigan State University in engineering. And when he came back to California, he decided to settle with his new wife in Rohnert Park, which is where we were at. over there, what he did was that he decided to party because he was celebrating a promotion. So he went to a bar with a couple of his friends, very reminiscent of what did happen to Vincent Chin in the 1980s.
25 years ago,
That's
almost.
correct, yes. And in 1997, what did happen was that Kwan Chung Kao, as my student, went into that bar and was just having a bunch of drinks with his friends. Somebody came up to him and started saying some racial epithets, mainly related to the fact that this other guy was laid off during the boom and bust cycles of the electronics industry. And this guy started saying some very tough words. After a while, there was a scuffle, and soon there was a dart that was thrown right into Kwan Chung Kao's face. It was painful, as you can imagine. And he got very, very upset. They had a bigger fight inside of the bar, and very quickly what ended up happening was that they separated them. Soon what happened was that Kwan Chung Kao said, I've been a victim of a hate crime, relating to what he learned inside of Asian American Studies in my class. And then what he did was that the police decided to take him back home by a taxi rather than to try to arrest the other individual for a possible hate crime. And what ended up happening is he went back to home angry at the fact that this other guy wasn't arrested, right? And in turn, he was put back to his home. And when he went to his home, he was still angry and flushed with alcohol, tried to go into his house, and his wife said, no way are you going inside because we have 3 little ones, 3 daughters, and they don't need to see you drunk. Well, what ended up happening? He got even more mad. The wife said, sleep it off. Go into the RV and just sleep it off during that night and then come out sober later on. What ended up happening is that he went into the middle of the street and he said, neighbors, neighbors, help me. And he said, I've been a victim of a hate crime. Of course, if you were a neighbor at 1:15 in the morning hearing this guy having taken off his shirt in the middle of night, flushed with alcohol and saying, neighbors, neighbors, help me, I've been a victim of a hate crime, what would you do? Well, what ended up happening was that they immediately called the police. And in a very, very quick number of circumstances, the police showed up. They tried to calm him down in some way. They decided that they would definitely need some backup. And soon what started to ensue was a very, very quick escalation. Very quickly, what happened was that he went into the RV to try to protect himself, supposedly, from some of the aggressive behavior of the police. The police, in turn, what they were trying to do was to calm him down. They said, stand down. They said, stand down. By that time, he had already taken out this fishnet pole, taken off the fishnet, took the pole out, hit the front of the front fender of the car, and very soon, of course, you can imagine the police officer was very upset. Very quickly afterwards, 3 shots were fired into his body. One of them severed his spinal cord. The other one was lodged deeply inside of his heart, and the other one passed through his body. In about 18 seconds, he was dead. His wife tried to help him. She was a registered nurse. She was prevented from doing so, and soon he died in the middle of the street. Very difficult time.
So what does that do to you?
It was very wrenching because as a faculty member that knew this student and knew that he had made a wonderful life for himself, who had all the future ahead of him, and that he had 3 blessed children right there, knowing at the middle of the night that everything was just cut short in an instant, especially in a series of incidents in which there was probable cause to wonder about whether that police officer did the right thing. He felt that he was in imminent danger from a weapon. In fact, it was reported the next day at the mayor's office that Kwan Chung Kao was brandishing a weapon in a martial arts fashion. Now, the big question by the Chinese American and by the Asian American community is, how do they come to that conclusion?
Right. And so that just sort of makes you think.
That's right.
About the plight, I guess, huh?
The plight, the stereotypes, the kind of imaging that exists in our society. The police officer testified that he thought that he was really a kung fu artist of some sort. There was no evidence ever given in court as to whether he was or not.
So in your studies of culture and race, you know, this seems to be a concern that African Americans, you know, pretty vocal about. And so there was a long period where issues were pretty much black and white.
Right.
But somehow they became grayer. because you have spent so many years studying this, what do you see as this evolution? When did it become grayer, and what does that mean for us as we move forward as a society?
I think in many ways, our society has always looked at things from a dichotomous perspective, black and white as you described it. It makes it much more simple to look at race dynamics, but in reality, our country was always multiracial. From the very start, there were Native Americans. Very soon afterwards, the Mexican Americans were dispossessed of their lands. Chinese Americans were here early in our history, and of course Filipino Americans as well. We can go on and on about the diversity of our country, but what does stand out is that each of these groups were considered racially distinct compared to the white population. And early on, our country made a pivotal, momentous decision. Unfortunate as it was, the Congress of the United States passed the Naturalization Act of 1790, and it made the decision that only white males could become naturalized citizens of the United States. That law was in effect for 162 years. It was not overturned until 1952.
So it's really not true that, it's really black and white, that there were all these other communities, but what did we as a society do? I'm thinking of, it's odd to say we because, we're not in that.
Right.
That these communities were dismissed?
I think they were invisible to some.
Are we more visible now?
I think there is much more of a visibility of Asian Americans as compared to the past. We still, however, misrepresented and many times stereotyped. Increasingly because of the actors that are present, because of some of the attention that's given to Asia, some of the worries about the threat that Asia might pose to our country. There's been much more of a presence in our minds about Asians and Asian Americans. But I have to say that it's tied into both the imagery of both a model minority and a threat.
Right. Let me jump then to your role as the director for the Asian American Studies program. What are your goals for this program? And what impact will it have on the student body, which seems to be continuing to increase in the number of Asian Americans?
I've got to say that's very exciting. I mean, University of Maryland is very rapidly rising in the ranks. And it's being considered as one of the best public schools in the nation. And it's a research university as well. And it has a public mission. It's a land-grant institution. That means that it must serve the public as well and the needs of the needy, frankly. And that makes it very important. The Asian American population that I have at the University of Maryland is diverse, not only in terms of their ethnicities of every single background, but also in terms of their class background. I'm really happy and proud to say that there are working class, middle class, and upper class students in addition to every single ethnicity. Today we have 19.5% of our population that is either Asian or Asian American. That means for us as an Asian American Studies program that we have to have a broad picture, that we have to look at Asia and Asian Americans as interlinkaged with one another.
And that does not mean that only Asian Americans are taking your classes.
No, not at all.
I mean,
we have lots of American students in general of every single ethnic background. And in addition, we have many international students from Asia and from Europe and the Middle East who also take these courses, and from Africa.
So does this mean that your program is expanding from year to year?
It is. We have 2 core faculty. I'm very proud to say that Dr. Daeyoung Kim and Dr. Lisa Marr are 2 of our core faculty. They have been the first appointed hires of our program. They've done wonderfully. I'm now the new director. We're expanding and adding more adjunct faculty to the already very, very famous and well-known adjunct faculty that we have. Let me just mention a few of those. Franklin Odo.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and he's with the Smithsonian Institution, of course.
He is an institution.
Oh, he is. And a history in all, yes. And we also have Phil Tajitsu Nash, who is very well known as a writer for Asian Week, who's also a part of us.
Both of them have been on my show,
That's
so
right.
we know they're very prominent.
Oh, wonderful. Another adjunct faculty is Jen Dals, and he is with the Asian Pacific Islander American Health Forum.
The Health Forum.
And he will be initiating the first ever course on Filipino American history taught at the University of Maryland. we came to the conclusion that if we wanted to be a 21st century Asian American Studies program, we needed to go expand beyond the base of what we traditionally consider as Asian American. The notions of the population just being of the old immigrants of Japanese, Chinese, and Korean, and Filipino of the first wave of immigrants is very much long gone and past. We now have a much greater diversity, and we are having South Asians coming in, many Southeast Asian Americans here, and many new Korean immigrants that are coming by too. So we need to expand our curriculum, and part of that is to recognize our growing Filipino American presence here too.
Well, we wish you a lot of luck with your role. We've run out of time, and I'll have you back as a guest to see, how that program is changing. So thank you very much, Larry, for joining me.
Thank you, Ginny.
It's time for us to take a short break. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
To be a mentor, you don't have to have all the answers.
Interesting. You hungry?
Yeah.
You just have to be yourself, which, by the way, is pretty good. Do good. Mentor a child. Call 1-877-BE-A-MENTOR.
While walking in a toy store the day before today, I overheard a crayon box with many things to say.
I don't like red, said Yellow, and Green said, nor do I. And no one here likes orange, but no one knows just why.
Well, I bought that box of crayons and took it home with me and drew with all the colors so the crayons could all see.
That each of us is special and everyone's unique, but it's when we get together that the picture is complete.
Welcome back to Ginny's, where East meets West. With the heated debate around immigration, it is quite clear that immigration is the new civil rights issue of the decade. It is fueled by great passion of supporters on both sides of the conversation. There are no obvious solutions and no one plan that suits everyone. What has often been viewed as a Latino issue is very much an Asian American issue as well. Joining me is someone who is very involved in the discussions around immigration at the national level. In this case, the hat that he is wearing is that of the executive director of OCA, a national Asian American organization headquartered in Washington, D.C. Join me in welcoming Michael Lin. Michael, thank you for joining me. I know that OCA is very involved in this conversation. Let's talk a little bit about some of the buzzwords that are going around: legal, illegal, undocumented, family unification, fourth preference. All of this surrounds the whole idea of comprehensive immigration reform.
Right.
What is OCA's position on this whole issue?
Well, let me sort of step back a little bit, talk about what are the challenges of the immigration reform. So with some clarity of what we are dealing with. One big piece, of course, in aftermath of 9/11 incident, there's a heightened awareness of the need of a secured border. And secondly is because of the major influx of mostly Latinos. We have something like 12, 13 millions of undocumented immigrants.
And we use the word undocumented instead of illegal because we're not quite sure.
Yeah, because very often they just overstay their visa,
Right.
not necessarily illegal in any way. And the third component is that our nation depends on family unification, immigration a great deal, but it has become such that now the wait could be anywhere from 5 to 20 some years, and it's just no longer a workable system.
So let me backtrack a little bit. There are members of communities, and here we're talking about the Asian American community, that have applied to come to this country and are waiting
Correct.
anywhere from a few years to
20-something
years
Those
just to be able to come in through the process.
Right, to unify with their own families.
Right.
And another component is that because of the workforce, for example, in agricultural sector, they have a need of a skilled worker or unskilled worker. And in the high-tech industry, they need skilled workers. And we just don't produce enough ourselves, so we rely on the influx of those population. So all this intertwined creates a very complex system. And that's what the Congress is trying to sort it out, how to reform the system so it becomes more workable, and what do